I think Quatermass in the Pit is probably one of the most thought-provoking and intelligent films ever made. In the US it's known as 5 million years to Earth, but in the UK we call it Quatermass in the Pit because it was based on the 1958, I think, BBC serial of the same name. If you haven't seen it yet, fair warning, there will be some spoilers in the video. It's set in 1960s London, and during a digging project, some workers uncover some curious objects. A team of archaeologists are drafted in to discover what's happening. During the dig, they unearth some very curious looking bones, and they discover a large cylindrical type object. But that's okay, because just the man who's needed is in London at the time. Bernard Quatermass himself, the legendary scientist of British science fiction. And as usual, he's having an argument with the authorities over his rocket group. Due to the discovery of this metal object in this archaeological dig, they sort of assume that it's a German bomb from World War II that's just unexploded and been left there for, at that point, 20 odd years. The bomb squad get called in and Quatermass tags along with them. He does this because it just so happens that the man in charge of the bomb squad at the time is also going to be his new military attaché, a character which no doubt he is going to butt heads with. So as they're digging around the bomb, they sort of discover that these ancient skeletons are actually inside the device as well, which is kind of impossible because these skeletons are 5 million years old, which piques Quatermass's curiosity. It's at this point the film sort of starts creeping into its sort of folk horror kind of narrative. As they investigate the object ever more closely, it sort of starts emitting these sort of powerful and mind-altering and psychic effects on the people around it. By that I mean it starts having a psychic effect on the people around it. They start experiencing these sort of vivid hallucinations of horrifying images and strange apparitions of sort of ghostly cavemen and things like that. So Quatermass puts his fantastic mind to the subject and he deduces that this object is of Martian origin, and the Martians had visited Earth 5 million years ago, and during these visits they altered the human genome, they altered our DNA and our biology. They left a influence on humanity that reaches back 5 million years, and among the many things they have left us, their legacy to us is these sort of latent psychic abilities and our violent and warlike tendencies. As this object continues to grow in power and it is fed electricity, its power and hold over the people of London grows, and people start displaying these violent tendencies and this latent psychic ability as well. Chaos ensues in London, violence erupts everywhere, there is murdering, there is pillaging, there is all of the worst parts of the Bible happening in the streets of London above them. And nobody is immune to it, or at least very few people. And those very few people that are immune to it are being targeted by the people that aren't immune to it, because they are the outsiders and must be eliminated. Quatermass himself is not immune to this. He falls prey to this psychic menace as much as everybody around him. In actual fact, it's only the character of Dr. Roney, who has been a pivotal part of the film so far as the lead archaeologist. He sort of snaps Quatermass out of this, and the two of them have to science the shit out of this to get it sorted out. And what they do is quite imaginative. I mentioned before earlier on that it's got this kind of folk horror aspect to it, and they draw on that really well because they work out that this shared psychic vision that people are having is an image that has just been ingrained in human civilization throughout its history, and it's the image of a horned devil. And they deduce that it's seen in cave paintings from 30,000 years ago, and it's depicted on the walls of churches, and it's everywhere. As they're making these deductions and trying to fix this, over London starts manifesting a gigantic horned devil creature made purely out of electricity, and Quatermass and Dr. Roney then have to go and tackle this entity at the same time as not getting murdered by the population of London, they stop thinking scientifically and start thinking religiously. And to their knowledge, the enemy of the devil is water and iron. So they work out that they can crash a crane into this thing and earth it out because it's made out of electricity. The film ends on quite a poignant note. It just ends suddenly, and you see Quatermass left there to sort of deal with the ramifications of this new knowledge and this new experience of what he's had, and the legacy of the interference in humanity's development. Pretty standard fare for a Hammer horror film from the 60s, eh? It's not. The film is really pioneering in many, many respects, and it is so influential. It blends science fiction and folk horror in such a really, really unique way and really, really well done manner. No other film before that managed to sort of blend this world of shaman and wizards and ancient English folklore and other beasts and goblins and things like that. And it's a recipe that's just been copied time and time again, to the point that actually when I first watched Quatermass in the Pit as a younger man, it didn't hit me how influential it was, because I just assumed, hey, those stories are told like that. I didn't know that Quatermass was the pioneer of it. It sort of captured the zeitgeist as well at the time, because the 60s is remembered by the phrase, do you remember the future? Because the 60s was the space age. But at the same time, people in the 60s were grappling with all of their own history and this new modern world with nuclear power stations and Doctor Who on the telly and things like that. And it sort of blends that eerie kind of horror aspect. The film delves into these themes of human evolution and psychic phenomenon and alien influence, and it used those themes to create a really early example of psychological horror where the fear is rooted in the unknown and in the mind. It had a real impact as well on storytelling going forward. This film was made 3 years before 2001: A Space Odyssey came to the cinemas, and it was based on a 1958 script. Yet it explores the impact of alien influence on our evolution. And again, 3 years before 2001: A Space Odyssey happens, there it goes. It's sitting there challenging this notion that we are the sole masters of our own evolution and our own destiny as a species. It introduced an entire new subgenre to science fiction, in that it's ancient aliens. The entire plot revolves around ancient aliens. The History Channel wouldn't exist without this film, and its effect is it casts a shadow over the entire subsequent history of science fiction. Look at that alien autopsy scene that happens in the film. I'm pretty sure John Carpenter was influenced by that, but it's not just him. Like I said, it's Stanley Kubrick, it's Stephen King, it's Doctor Who, it's The X-Files, it's Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. You name a science fiction property that is subsequent to it, and they have used tropes developed in that. Even the character of Quatermass himself is massively influential. I personally don't think we would have a Fox Mulder as we know him without Quatermass, specifically Quatermass from this film. And popular culture is just littered with references to this film. In fact, have a little competition with each other in the comments below to see who's got the most obscure reference to it they can find. It's a real important touchstone as well in the history of British sci-fi. And by that I mean, I think it sort of establishes British sci-fi as sort of a bit more cerebral, a bit more intelligent, and a lot darker in its tone than contemporary American science fiction. And no, I'm not dismissing American science fiction at all. I adore American science fiction, as you can tell by the other videos on this channel, before you start attacking me in the comments over it. But it's in the years subsequent to it coming out that it's achieved this cult status. It underperformed in America, and it did all right for Hammer in the UK. It set up the director quite nicely, although Roy Ward Baker was sort of established in the UK at this point. He was sort of seen as a little bit past it. He'd had his Hollywood years behind him. He directed films like Night to Remember, which is a classic in Titanic genre films. He directed a few episodes of The Avengers, and The Champions, I think he directed. I know he directed a few episodes of Round or Not Kurt Deceased as well later on, but this was part of his free picture deal he had at Hammer Studios. And what an entry into the trilogy, eh? Andrew Keir took on the role of Quatermass from Brian Donlevy. Donlevy had retired from filmmaking by the time this film had come out. There'd been a 10-year hiatus in the franchise at that point, so the role had to sort of be recast for that reason. I actually think there's a more subtle reason to that though, and what I think actually is going on here is there was a reason they cast an American actor to play Quatermass in the films, and it wasn't just about making money. It wasn't just about making the film a more attractive prospect for American cinema goers. I think because of Quatermass's inherent character, he's quite dynamic and go-getting and action-orientated at times, as well as very intelligent. So casting Brian Donlevy to play Quatermass in those first two films was them sending like a really subtle message saying, look, hey, we've got this crusty old Britain that's decaying and falling apart, and it's in the middle of post-war austerity, and the institutions of this nation are represented by the bureaucracy that Quatermass encounters, and he does encounter a lot of shit and a lot of bureaucracy. And Brian Donlevy plays him as this sort of flexing, dynamic, young, go-getting character representing what the United States was at the time. But with Quatermass in the pit, they're telling a very different type of story. And I love that they cast Andrew Keir in the role. And he wasn't happy with it. He wasn't happy in the role. He didn't enjoy the shoot. He didn't enjoy the production. He didn't enjoy the character. He felt that the role was written for somebody else, not him. And it can sort of show sometimes in the film. He does seem a little bit absent at times, but I have such a soft spot for him as an actor, purely and solely based on his performance in Doctor Who and the Daleks' Invasion Earth 2150 AD. The film actually, on a technical level, isn't the most accomplished of films. It's a Hammer horror film from 1967. You don't expect much from it. But what it does do well, it does amazingly well, and that is that brilliant script that was brilliantly brought to the screen by everybody involved. And one of the strongest aspects to it is its soundtrack. It's got a really, really great musical score to it, but it must have been a great film, because 60 years later, here I am stood here talking about it. And as I said, one of its strengths is how influential it is. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching my video. Please leave a like and a comment down below. It really helps growing the channel. And if you really enjoyed the video, hit the subscribe button.
Tony, if we found that our Earth was doomed, say by climatic changes, what would we do about it?
Nothing. Just go on squabbling as usual.